The erudite talk by Madam Ravi. So this is going to be a very light presentation for you. As it was introduced, I am not an academic person. I am a computer engineer by profession, and literature and cultural studies is more of my passion. So I'll be speaking on this topic, Indic Civilizational Consciousness in Modern Literature. So before we go to the presentation, I profusely thank Dr. Ramaswamy Subramani for inviting me to this national seminar. It's heartening to know that the English department of this college is conducting this. The normal expectation is that the English department in any college is highly westernized, right? They even have some kind of apathy towards anything Indic, including the languages. Let's say Tamil department or the other departments are the ones who would carry forward Indian culture. But contrary to that general perception, here we have a very pleasant surprise of the English department conducting such a seminar. I thank all the professors, and students, and the elders who have graced this occasion. So, what is civilizational consciousness? Let's start with that question. And what is Indic civilizational consciousness? So the basic idea is that India is essentially a civilization, not just geography, nation state, or society. That's the fundamental idea in this. So what we mean by that? So in our own languages, in Sanskritam, we call civilization as Samskriti. And in Tamil, we call it as Panbad. And it's actually a very precise equivalent of the word civilization, something that makes you civil, cultural, right? Different from, let's say, a beastly nature or a primitive nature. So this is the fundamental premise on which everything else. So India, these days we hear a lot of discourses of things like constitutional patriotism. As if India is some kind of a cosmetic entity which just suddenly came into existence in 1947, and it is no more than that. So why have any emotional attachment to the idea of India? Why stand up for the national anthem? So even students in highly educated colleges and universities asking such questions as if it is something so profound. It's such a silly question. So that's the very first premise. And from that, what naturally follows is that Indian civilization is prized and cherished. It must be protected and nurtured as a living heritage, not just as a museum piece. Like Egyptian civilization or Mesopotamian civilization or even Greek and Roman civilizations about which we only read in history books and not as a living heritage. But the premise, the civilizational consciousness that we speak of here means that this civilization, the Indian civilization, is prized and cherished, and we want to protect and nurture it as a living heritage. And the moment you talk about civilization, people say it's grand narrative. And the postmodernist jumps up and says that all grand narratives are bad. These are all gross generalizations. So, Indian grand narrative is something very unique. Even if we go by the Western definition of that word grand narrative, the Indian grand narrative is plural and diverse. As we know, anyone who is even basically familiar with India and its culture knows this. It's very plural, it's diverse. And what does it do with all the little and micro narratives? It does not destroy them. It compiles them, it contextualizes, and it integrates all of them into one grand narrative. So this is what is unique about the Indian grand narrative. And it has its own inborn and cultural life. You know, the other popular thing that we hear is that India is a composite culture. As if there is nothing elemental about it. As if it doesn't have anything inborn. It is only a composite mix or concoction of all the influences that fell upon India. That's not true. It has its own unique and inborn cultural life. It's not a composite culture. Now you may ask, there are these two terms, Indian and Indic. So why did I not use the word Indian here? And you know, the presentation is titled Indic Civilizational. Ideally, there shouldn't be any difference, right? I mean, anything that is truly Indian is Indic. Why do we have to even use or coin such a word? It is because the moment when we say Indian culture, let us say, so many things come in. We'll say cricket. Cricket is Indian culture. Bollywood is Indian culture. Somebody might even say corrupt politics is actually Indian culture. You know, anything that you see in India gets lumped under the title Indian culture, and that is not what we really mean by something called civilization, right? So we want to denote a core of our cultural and national life, which is lofty. So that is why the word Indic is used here. But ideally, both terms should be interchangeable, is what I feel. And the other premise before we get into this topic is that the clash of civilization is not a mere theory. It is a global geopolitical reality. I mean, anyone who is familiar with the world situation knows that behind every world event, whether it is the American economy falling, or the turmoil in the Arab world, or what Japan is doing, what is happening in South Korea or other Southeast nations, there is always an underlying narrative of clash of civilizations. There are global powers fighting for supremacy, right? So there is this Western hegemony, the United States, the European countries, the Christian church. So that is one global power. The second power is the Arab world, the religion of Islam, and the oil economy, and all the Middle Eastern powers fighting for superiority. And the third, one such power, is centered around China, which has a communist narrative, and the Chinese hegemony. And the Chinese are asserting even their cultural superiority, though they proclaim themselves as a communist nation today. So all these powers are actually fighting for supremacy. So this is not a mere theory. So this is the global reality that we must come to terms with. So how does this link with literature? So once you have this civilizational consciousness, it is prevalent in the modern literature in India in many ways. And we can look at it in phases. So in pre-independence modern Indian literature, there was one kind of civilizational consciousness. In post-independence, there was another kind. Post-liberalization, which is after 1990, there is some kind of other kind of Indian consciousness, and the post-millennium, which is the 21st century, when we entered. So there are these clear trends in modern literature, in both in Indian languages as well as English, specifically the Indian English literature. So when I speak of civilizational consciousness, what are its constituents? So these three words I want you to take back from this presentation, even when you forget everything else what I say. Sense of history, sense of ethos and values, sense of rasa. So these are the three constituents of the civilizational consciousness, specifically in the literature context. So let us see each of these elaborately. What is sense of history and why it is very, very important? So it is shared memories of the past, preserved by a community and imparted over and over multiple generations. So when you read about Jewish diaspora, you read that in the first, about 2,000 years back, when the Jews scattered all over the world from their homeland, they carried this memory of their ancestral land. They referred to places and rivers and mountains of their ancestral land of Palestine. And they said that, let us come back and meet there. So this they passed on generation after generation. So at last, closely after 2,000 years, after World War II, they could actually reclaim their homeland. So they had such a powerful sense of history, of shared memory. And do we have this in the Indian context? India being such an ancient country. So in our classical Indian literary forms, we had it to some extent. So we have Itihasa, Purana, Kavya, we have legends and ballads and folklore. So when you talk about Ramayana and Mahabharata, what is it really? It is shared memory. So you see so much of literary devices there, supernatural elements and philosophy and all other things. But everyone agrees, including the Marxist historian, like D.D. Kosami, that there is a very strong historical core to our epics, to the Ramayana and Mahabharata. So even the adversaries of Hindutva agree that there is a historical core. And then we have the Puranic stories. So in every region, town and village, we have a very rich folklore that talk about the previous generations, the battles that they fought, the atrocities that they suffered, everything. It is passed on in some form or the other. So during freedom movement, the nationalism was the overruling sentiment all across India. The whole India has to unite and fight against the British. So it was very good in a sense. So all other historical conflicts were temporarily sidelined in this process. So for example, some of these caste and community conflicts, or the Hindu-Muslim conflict, which has a bloody history of centuries, all this was kind of sidelined, at least temporarily, during the freedom movement. But it's impossible to put those ghosts to sleep. So they just re-emerged after the independence. So what happened is that in the post-independent era, we have a lot of negationism and denial of these historical narratives from the established and eminent historian people. For example, so whenever there is this narrative about Varna and Jati and caste and community, the only way it is presented is it's a hierarchical and oppressive structure. But it is far from truth. If you talk to your grandfather, or if in the families which have preserved some kind of family history, you will immediately come to know that it was not so. The Indian historical narratives and the ballads don't give this picture at all. So there was a social dynamics and flexibility in this system. Right? It's a very broad topic. I'll just give you one example. You take all the mighty South Indian kingdoms of the medieval era. So be it the Vijayanagara kingdom or the Nayaka kings. So all these kingly people, they belong to what is called the Shudra Varna or the fourth Varna. But they became such powerful kings and rulers, and the whole society accepted their dominance. The founders of the Vijayanagara Empire, you know them by name Harihara and Bukka. Right? So in colloquial language, they are called Hakka and Bukka. They actually belong to a hill tribe in Karnataka. So they were never from any royal family or a pure Kshatriya family or anything. But they established such a glorious kingdom which was accepted by all the other small kingdoms of South India. And it is this kingdom which protected South India from Muslim invasion. And it protected all our culture and arts and religion and everything. So the other example is that of Chhatrapati Shivaji. He was also born in what is called a Shudra Varna, the fourth caste. And he is still remembered as a great liberator and a hero of all over India, not just in Maharashtra. So this was the real story about the caste and jati, which was never told. So the other negationism is about the atrocities and destruction during the Islamic invasions and the Muslim rule. I'll just shift my place a bit here so that I can read the quote. It's difficult from there. So, there is this beautiful quote from Will Durant in his book Story of Civilization. I'll read it out for you. The Mohammedan conquest of India is probably the bloodiest story in history. It is a discouraging tale, for its evident moral is that civilization is a precarious thing whose delicate complex of order and liberty, culture and peace may at any time be overthrown by barbarians invading from without or multiplying within. It's such a profound quote that suits the Indian situation even now. A professor spoke about the breaking India forces during the introduction. So when he says, the civilization and peace can at any time be overthrown by two forces, the barbarians invading from without, that is from outside, or multiplying within. So this actually happened during the Mohammedan conquest, right? So initially it is the outsiders, the Muhammad bin Qasim and the Ghazni Muhammad and Gauri Muhammad. They plundered, pillaged, killed people, destroyed temples. But over time, the local converts, they themselves became so fanatical that they pulled down their own culture and civilization. So this is again being denied by our eminent historians. And the third example is the loot of India under British Raj and the catastrophic famines that the British caused. So Madam spoke about it. So these are examples of how our sense of history is never allowed to develop. So here is an interesting quote from V.S. Naipaul, whom I'm sure you are all familiar with. He is a Nobel laureate, a very renowned English writer. And both these quotes, which I have put here, I'll read it out. He spoke these before receiving the Nobel Prize. So remember that. So we are all familiar with R.K. Narayan, and his stories are in all the English textbooks. So he says this about R.K. Narayan. In this view, from one of the mystical of R.K. Narayan's books, fire and sword of defeat are like abstractions. There is no true suffering, and rebirth is almost magical. These small people of Narayan's books, earning petty sums from petty jobs and comforted and ruled by ritual, seem oddly insulated from history. They go to ancient temples, but they do not have the confidence of those ancient builders. They themselves can build nothing that will last. These small people dream simply of what they think has gone before, but they are without personal ancestry. There is a great blank in their past. In Narayan's book, when the history is known, there is less the life of the wise and eternal Hindu India than a celebration of the redeeming British peace. See, we see a glaring example of this in this very own city, Madurai. So, not many people in Madurai would even know the history of what the Meenakshi temple went through, how it was attacked by the Malik Kafur. The temple was entirely burned down, right? And the deities of Shiva and Meenakshi were actually preserved underground by a group of archakas. And this very city, Madurai, was under a cruel and oppressive sultanate, Muslim rule, for close to a century. And unspeakable atrocities were committed here. In fact, the foreign traveler Ibn Battuta, who visited Madurai during that period, has written about it. How many people of this city even know about it? And the current temple, the grand temple that you see today, this is not the old temple built by the Pandyas. This was the temple built by the Vijayanagara kings and the later Nayaka kings, who liberated after waging a war into this city and reclaiming this temple. So, when Naipaul says this, it's not a joke. It's a reality that we see in every Indian city and town. And the second quote is even more powerful. He says, India has been a wounded civilization because of Islamic violence. Pakistanis know this. Indeed, they revel in it. It's only Indian Nehruvians like Romila Thapar who pretend that Islamic rule was benevolent. We should face facts. Islamic rule in India was at least as catastrophic as the later Christian rule. See, he calls the British rule as the Christian rule, which it truly was. The Christians created massive poverty in what was a most prosperous country. The Muslims created a terrorized civilization out of what was the most creative culture that ever existed. India was wrecked and looted. This sense of history, where do we have it? It's such an important thing. We simply don't have it. And now you wonder, after saying all this, so this book, Wounded Civilization, was actually written in the 1970s. And V.S. Naipaul was still awarded the Nobel Prize. So that's what is something to ponder about. So if you are really convinced of something, a true writer or a true creator of literature says that boldly. He doesn't worry about the political correctness.
And he was still awarded Nobel Prize.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I say.
It's a turning point.
What is that?
And the book turned very
Can you go back to the previous slides?
Yes.
Or can you control it? The
Previous slide.
Okay. So this was about sense of history. Okay. So the next is sense of ethos and values, which is the second thing. What are these ethos and values? These are worldviews, frameworks. So there is a distinct Indian worldview compared to Western worldview. I hope that doesn't need explanation. And we can speak about it for hours, but one major thing that I want to talk about here is that life goals. So what does each civilization mention it as life goal? So in our Indic worldview, we have this Purushartha, 4 life goals. So you all know about it. Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. We say that way in Sanskritam. In Tamil, we say Aram, Porul, Inbam, Veedu. And as most of the people here are Tamil speaking, we all know that Thiruvalluvar wrote his great Kural, expounding the three Purusharthas, Aram, Purul and Inbam, he also mentioned the Veedu within the Aram itself. So if you see the way these life goals are divided, it's beautiful. So when you talk about wealth and pleasure, which is Artha and Kama, it's purely a transactional reality. You know, it's completely worldly. Why do you earn wealth? To be happy. So earn wealth in the rightful way and enjoy it. You know, there is no guilt in enjoyment. This is so grossly different from the Christian worldview, for example, which posited sex as sin. Right? So in the very language, when you say, somebody says, I sinned, it means he had sex. Why should sex be sin? After all, it is the primeval act of procreation. But in our languages, does anyone speak of sex as sin? None of the Indian languages have such connotation. So, kama, pleasure, that is one of the life goals. And then there is this other transcendental life goal, which is moksha, liberation. Move away from all the worldly life, know your true self. That is moksha. And there is something linking these two, which is dharma. And there is, you know, I didn't write the English translation because none exists. It is such a unique word, which is untranslatable. Dharma in Sanskrit or Aram in Tamil. So what is this? So it is the axis and the anchoring point, harmonizing both these values, the transactional values and the transcendental values. So this is a very lofty idea. How does Indian civilization sustain it? So we have lifestyle, we have customs, we have rituals, we have ceremonies and festivals. I mean, these are not just the imaginations of some foolish or jobless people. You know, so many festivals. All this is created to carry these, you know, to put these ideas, lofty ideas in practice. So there is an essential value underlying each of these cultural practices and expressions. But unfortunately, the current narrative is that it just goes by the outward appearance of it and tries to distort its meaning. There are so many examples. I'll just give one. So there is this traditional benediction: "May cows and Brahmins be free of fear." You know, in Tamil we say "Vaalga Andanar Vanavar Aninam." It comes in Tevara. In Sanskrit we say "Go Brahmane Pyo Shubhavastu Nityam." What does it mean? Cows and Brahmins be free of fear. So immediately the person asks, why so much preferential treatment for cows and Brahmins? Of course, the shloka further says that let everyone be happy. Right? Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha. That also it says. But it especially says these two things. It's not that, that our ancestral rishis wanted to privilege cows. They like cow the most among all the animals. Or they always wanted to put Brahmins at a pedestal. That's not the reason in it. In fact, if you really see what value they want to convey by that benediction is that protection of the weak. Because the Brahmins were never allowed to carry weapons. All the other people, by Shastra, they can carry weapon. And the Brahmin was not supposed to carry weapon. So he is weak. So the weakest in the society should always be protected. He should be safe. And a cow is an animal which is so innocent. Anyone can catch a cow and kill it. It's not like a tiger. It's not even like a cat. So it is protection of the weak. That value is what is symbolized by the traditional benediction. So, in fact, many of our the current day Indians are so ignorant of such things. But Sister Nivedita, who was in her original, her original name was Margaret Noble, as you all know. She was a highly educated Irish lady. She followed Swami Vivekananda, became his disciple and changed her name. Look at what she says about that common sight, the lady putting rangoli or kolam every day morning in front of the house. She says, for thousands of years, most Indian women have risen with the light to perform the salutation of the threshold. thousands of years of simplicity and patience, like that of the peasant, like that of the grass, speak in this beautiful rite. It is this patience of woman that makes civilizations. It is in this patience of the Indian woman, with this her mingling of large power of divide, that has made and makes the Indian nationality. It's such a simple act, but she, coming from a completely different cultural background, understood the beauty of it. And the leftist, the revisionist, the anti-Hindu idiots in our own country, they see this scene every day and they just either pass over it or make fun of it. The worst. Next slide. So that is what was sense of ethos and values. So the third one. So sense of rasa. So you all, being readers of literature, we understand what is rasa. So literally it means essence, right? So the fruit of the essence of the grapes is called draksha rasa. In Tamil we call it as pada rasam. But in literature it means that ultimate feeling that you get after reading a good poetry, or watching a wonderful dance performance, or listening to good music. So whatever stays in your heart, that is what is the rasa. Whatever emerges out of art and literature, the ultimate essence, that's what. So as part of the sense of Indic civilization consciousness, the literature should have a sense of rasa. So what is this? It is the Indic outlook on arts and aesthetics and poetics and literary theories. So we all read about so much of Western poetic theories like structuralism, modernism, postmodernism, existentialism, but there is hardly any introduction to the Indian literary theories and the Indian art theories, starting from the Bharata Muni, Anandavardhana, Abhinavagupta, and Irangovadigal. So many great Indian scholars have developed beautiful theories on art and literature. And unfortunately, our students in humanities are hardly taught about this, which is a lapse. That is why there is no sense of rasa in much of the literary works. So if you just look at it, it's mind-boggling. So in India, we have a long and enriched classical literature. Over 2 millennium in Sanskrit and Tamil, 2000 years of literature in Sanskritam and Tamil, and a couple of centuries in all other languages like Telugu, Kannada, Bengali, etc. So we have similar heritage in architecture, fine arts, music, dance. Which country? None of the countries in Europe or anywhere in the world, maybe except China, have such long heritage of literature and art. And if you go to Indian mind sciences, exemplified in Yoga Vasishtha or the Buddhist text, they have a much more profound and deeper understanding of the mind than the Western models of psychology. Be it Sigmund Freud, which is called a Freudian psychology, or even Carl Jung, who borrowed many of his theories actually from the Indian texts. But the Indian mind sciences are more profound than both of these. So ultimately, the best and lofty Indian modern literature draws inspiration and leverages from all this. It does not repel, negate, or denounce it. So only a fool will throw away all these 2000 years of heritage and he will say that I will simply start from the scratch. Is it even possible to start from the scratch? The moment you write a few sentences in Tamil, the very language is rooted in this civilization. It's impossible to separate both. So I have given a quote from the Bharata's Natya Shastra on what is Natya. What Bharata tells about Natya, it applies to all arts, including literature. He says, thus with sublime sentiments, rasa and emotions, bhava, in all actions and depictions, instructing all in noble ways. Natya will exist in this world. When the inherent real nature of the world, with its joys and sorrows, is expressed through gestures, that is abhinaya, and the like, it is called a natya. Filled with dharma, conducive to fame, long life, goodness, and intellect, educating the world, this natya will flourish. Natya vetat bhavishyati, he says. You look at this. It's very important. He doesn't look at music or dance as entertainment. He links it directly to dharma. He says that filled with dharma, the natya will educate the world. So it is a means of education, not just a means of entertainment. So this is the Indian idea. So, till now, next slide. Can you move to the next slide? Yeah. So this is the only thing I want to spoke about before we proceed to the rest of the presentation, which are just examples. Okay. So the Indic civilization, it constitutes 3 points: sense of history, sense of ethos and values, sense of rasa. In the rest of the presentations, I am just going to give a few examples from literature. How all this manifests. So first we will start with Tagore and Bharati, both of whom we are familiar with. So they both are pioneers and archetypes of the nationalist era in modern India. So they both are prolific writers, enormous. This Bharati's works, the Kala Varisai Paduthapatta Bharati Padaippugal. So whatever the Bharati wrote, prose, poetry, newspaper articles, everything, it has come as like 10 volumes. If I keep it here, it will be like this tall. And it is priced at 10,000 rupees. So many pages our great Subramanya Bharati has written in his short life of just 40 years. So prolific writers, they wrote poetry, prose, fiction, philosophy, everything. They were strongly rooted in the Indic Kavi tradition. So they both are called Mahakavi in their languages. But yet they embraced modernity with vigor. So their ideas were always novel and revolutionary, if you want to call it. They embraced modernity with vigor, open mind, and free thinking, both in life as well as literature. But there is one subtle difference between Tagore and Bharati here, which I have brought up in the next bullets. So Tagore had great pride as an Indian, and even had mild contempt for British rule. But he was very skeptical of practical nationalist movements. The Bengal revolutionaries, who waged an armed struggle against British rule. So Tagore actually condemned them and spoke against their ways in his novels like Ghare Baire, a very popular one. But Bharati openly identified himself as the follower of Tilak and Lajpat Rai. And V.O. Chidambara Pillai. In fact, he had to flee to Pondicherry to escape British persecution. He advocated fierce nationalism through his work Panchali Samadana. So where he uses Draupadi as a metaphor for Bharat Mata. Tagore wrote brilliant fiction in prose. He chose poetry only for romantic and spiritual themes. But Bharati expressed everything in poetry. The patriotism, love, Vedanta. He chose prose mainly for his journalistic writings. So this is a difference in the expressions of both these. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, this is Adarsh Hindu Hotel and Aarov Ke Niketan. So both these are very popular Bengali novels, very renowned. They have been translated into English as well. This novel, Adarsh Hindu Hotel, appeared in 1940. It's by Vibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyaya. He is the author of other famous novel Pather Panchali, which we all are familiar with. So, what is this novel about? It narrates the life dream of the protagonist. So that is a small person. To start his own hotel, and his struggles and troubles in the process, and he ultimately succeeds in that. And he names his hotel as Adarsh Hindu Hotel. That's very important. And it is a great tale of true Indian lives, nobility in simplicity, humility in victory, inborn Indian dharmic sense of honesty. It's a beautiful novel. It's a small novel. If you get a chance, you should read it. You look at this, it's such a great tale. And the very name, Adarsh Hindu Hotel, is so positive. And interestingly, Satyajit Roy made a movie out of Pather Panchali, which became world famous. We all know that. There was a movie made out of this novel as well, by the same name, Adarsh Hindu Hotel. You can search in YouTube and watch the movie. It was made by Ardhendu Sen, I think, but it never became popular. Because obviously the Westerners didn't like the idea of some very ordinary person successfully starting a hotel. And and all through he is depicted as a very honest man. He will never compromise in the quality of the food. He will, all those eternal values of Indian civilization is reflected in his hotel. Now we have the Malayalam movie Ustad Hotel, which is, in a way, I suspect probably the director was inspired by this, and instead of Adarsh Hindu Hotel, he made it as a Ustad Hotel. This is where it comes from. The other novel is Aroke Niketan, which was in 1953 by Tara Shankar Bandyopadhyay. This has also come in English. It's a beautiful novel. It explores the great dilemma of Indian mind at the threshold of modernity. The subject it chooses is very interesting. There is a conflict between a respected Ayurvedic doctor in a village and a newcomer allopathic doctor. So the conflict between both these people. So this is what is narrated, but essentially it is a metaphor for the great dilemma of the Indian mind, whether to stay with the old or to embrace the new. How much he can stay with the old and how much new he should embrace. It is that dilemma which is explored in this novel. Two different worldviews, two different eras. So you can call it as a novel of what is called as Yuga Sandhi. The story revolves around life, death, love, betrayal, and all other human emotions. But all through this novel, the author writes, he doesn't take any sides. See, that's what is beautiful. He neither takes the side of the old, nor takes the side of the new. Just like our Kavi Rishis, like Valmiki or Vyasa. Without taking sides, he dispassionately tells the story. Next slide. The next thing I want to speak about the short stories of Pudumai Pittan, whom we all know. So Pudumai Pittan, one of the most influential writers of Tamil fiction, and whomever we have heard him as a very revolutionary writer, meaning Puratchi or Puratchi Eluthavar, and a progressive writer, meaning Murpokku Eluthavar. So these are the words, labels with which he is identified. His stories are characterized by novelty, social satire. They are very satirical, criticism of the established convention. But this is all just one part. The other part is they have very deep philosophical insights rooted in the Indian wisdom, and nobody tells this. Pudumai Pittan means he is a Puratchi Eluthavar who just wanted to destroy everything. I will just give an example of 3 stories. These are all very popular stories. All of them are beautiful. The first story is Achangare Pillayar, which was written in 1930, the riverside Ganesha. So, in every Tamil Nadu village, if you go in the riverside or lakeside, under the banyan tree, you see a Ganesha. Nobody knows how long has he been sitting there and who put him there. So, he uses that as a metaphor for this, you can call it as Hinduism or the Indian culture. Nobody knew when it started. Ever since time started, the Ganesha has been sitting there. That's how he starts that story. And then he says how standing firm withstanding ravages of time and change. It's a very humorous story at outward. He says that the Ganesha was simply not getting any light. The branches had so much covered him that he was simply not getting any light. So this is a metaphor for all the rituals and ceremonies and so much. Then he says a person by name Buddha came. He came with an axe and he cut all those branches. Suddenly Ganesha got sunlight. And he got too much of sunlight that the Ganesha, it appeared to Ganesha that he will burn down. And then he says another person by name Shankara came and he put some more foliage around it. This is how the story goes. It's beautiful. It describes that. It is all the way up to the Muslim invasion and the British rule, the story goes. It's a beautiful story. And the other story is called Pudiya Kundu, New Cage. So this is a story written in 1935 around exploitation of boys and Christian conversion tactics in Christian convents in a place called the Palayam Kote, which is near Tirunelveli. Even today, no writer would write in such themes, but Puthuvai wrote it as early as 1935. There is this other story, Kite Travel, which is rope snake. It's a very familiar Vedantic metaphor. The world is like Maya. So when you see a rope in darkness, you think it is a snake and get afraid. So he uses that. He takes this mundane life and the very title called Kite Travel, rope snake. So if you don't know Vedanta, you can't even understand that story. And this was published. Next slide. And then I am talking about 3 Kannada novels. Avarana, Sartha and Samskara. So the first 2 novels are by the famed writer S.L. Bhairappa. He is still living. The first novel is called Avarana, and all these novels are translated in English. You can read them. It raises pertinent and searching questions about religion, liberalism, and identity. And it highlights the importance of unshackling oneself from the bonds of false knowledge. So it's a beautiful story of a village girl called Lakshmi, who falls in love with a very, a communist person who happens to be a Muslim. But still, he forces her to convert to Islam. He is a communist, that's a different matter. But he forces her to convert. She converts. And then what she undergoes in the family, and finally the conflict between her family. Then once she goes to her father's library, searches the books, notes written by him on all the Islamic invasion, and finally she removes the veil that was covering her understanding. So this is the present day story. This story is interspersed with another story set in the medieval era when the actual invasion happens. There is this fort in the Devagiri, the fort falls, the prince is captured, the princess is kidnapped. So both these stories go in parallel. It's a beautiful novel. And I highly recommend this. And the other novel is Sartha, which means the caravan. It narrates the journey of a protagonist called Nagabhanda. So caravan is like that cart, the Baravandi, the carts that carry goods from village to village. So that's how the transport was in olden days. So this caravan moves from one place to the other. It starts from Vidisha in Madhya Pradesh, then it goes to Madura, then it goes to Bengal, then it goes to Sindh. But through that, it is a journey through these towns as well as philosophies. So he encounters Buddhists, he encounters Tantra practitioners, he encounters Vedantics. In fact, Shankaracharya himself comes as a character in this novel. And then there is Muslim invasion on the Sindh, and he gets captured. So that's how the story goes. And there is another novel by the famous U.R. Ananthamurthy. He is famous for giving a statement that if Narendra Modi becomes Prime Minister, I will leave India, But unfortunately, he didn't leave India. He had to leave the world. He passed away in 2014. Anyway, so he wrote this novel Samskara in 1970s that explores the moral crisis faced by the Indian tradition and convention under modernity. So he describes a village which is totally steeped in old habits and customs. Somebody dies in a house. There is nobody to cremate him. There is argument inside the village, who should cremate him, who should not, and this goes on for days. And the corpse rots for so many days, and then the epidemic starts in the village. So he gives a completely negative view of Indian village life and custom. And it eventually ends up portraying it as nothing more than a rich and scandalous thing. The whole Indian civilization is like that rotten corpse, is the message this novel gives. You know what happened? Your Anandamurti is highly celebrated in India. He was given Jnanpith Award. He is known abroad. In all the Western universities, his books are read. But S.L. Bhairappa, you see, he was born in 1934. He got just his Padma Shri, not Jnanpith, only in 2015 for writing those two brilliant novels. In spite of remaining a great, much loved Kannada writer. So S.L. Bhairappa is loved by people. But U.R. Anandamurti was the one who walked away with all the honors and awards. Next. So, coming to Tamil, we have two writers, Lasa Ramamritam, who is known by the name Lasa Ra, and Jayamohan. So, Lasa Ramamritam is a unique and extraordinary Tamil writer. So, you ask, but you look at his stories, all his stories revolve around women. Mothers, daughters, wives, lovers, friends. Most of the stories happen inside the family only. So what is so extraordinary about it, you ask? Is it like TV serials? No. So every one of his stories is a manifestation of a feminine character that transcends the temporal and connects to the feminine, the bigger feminine, embodied in the very essence of existence. You call her as Devi or Shakti or the Mata. You know, in every village of Tamil Nadu, you have Amman temples. This very own city is supposed to be still ruled by Meenakshi, the Devi. So the mother worship and the idea of Shakti is so prevalent across the Tamil society. But not many Tamil writers really explored it. You know, Ilangovadigal, a couple of centuries back, wrote his Silappadigaram and made Kannagi as a manifestation of Shakti. But then it was Lasa in the modern literature who brought back that aspect of the feminine. His stories are very much rooted in reality. But the prose is possessing a mantra-like effect, going on to the very boundaries of language. In fact, whoever reads Lasa will simply fall in love with his language. There are die-hard admirers of his books. The other writer is Jayamohan. He is a prolific Tamil writer. He has written close to about 150-200 books, novels, short stories, novellas, books on criticism, biographies, numerous other non-fiction. These days he is very much into Tamil cinema as well. But that is a very decadent part of his literary career. Let's not talk about it. One of his novels, Vishnupuram, his first and most acclaimed of novels, it's a metafiction. It's a layered fantasy. It tells the story of 800 years. So obviously the book will at least have about 1,000 pages, you can imagine. It's a very heavy book. Various Indic philosophical schools, traditions and arts. But the thing about this novel is, it is not like a pure and pristine river of Lasa. So the reason I put both these writers is that Lasa is an example, if we say, a pure and pristine flow of Indic civilizational thought. Jayamohan is an example of a river which takes in all the muck. So he has some Marxist ideas, some postmodernist, magical realism, some of these elements put into the Indic philosophical stream. So that is what is Jaymohan's writing is about. But still it's worth reading, he's a great writer. And starting 2014, he is writing his own fictionalized rendering of the Mahabharata. He has already written 20 plus novels. It's called Ved Murasu. Some of you may be reading it. Next. Okay, so this is going to be the last of my examples, and then we will sum up. So Amitabh Ghosh and Amish Tripathi. You may wonder what is really the connection. I just put it, for the sake of it. And Amitabh Ghosh, the English writer, has been awarded Jnanpith recently, I think this year. So what he writes, he says in one of his interviews, I realize in hindsight that this is really what always interested me the most. The Bay of Bengal, the Arabian Sea, the Indian Ocean. So ocean is what interests him. But then you might ask, does he really want to write about voyages and sailing and things like that? No. The connections and the cross connections between these regions. So all the political struggle, the real wars, the trade wars that happen across the oceans. So that is what all his novels are about. So they have a very historical setting in the Indian Ocean. So the plots and themes, his plots and themes are very well researched, factual and very authentic because he had a journalistic background. The reason I put those is that his name here is that the sense of history and clash of civilizations, this is not very explicit in his stories, but they emerge indirectly and subtly. So in one of his stories, he talks about a maid in the house of a British lord who is working, who has actually been posted in Turkey. Okay? So this is during the colonization. The British lord is living in Turkey and there is this housemaid. And if you trace the story of the housemaid, she was one of the girl who was sold as a slave. He was a Hindu girl whose ancestors were sold as slaves during the Muslim rule from India. And after so many generations later, she is working as a maid in Turkey. And we have so many people all over the world, we don't even know. Gypsies, for example, right? Who are, we know them through Hollywood movies and writings. The people who are called gypsies, who keep wandering all European countries singing songs, they speak a language called Romani, which is derived from Hindi actually. They are supposed to have Indian ancestry. So, of course, Amitabh Ghosh doesn't write this directly. But somewhere deep inside his novel, there is this character through whom we can trace the sense of history. And Amish Tripathi is in an entirely different world. He is a very commercial writer. His novels sell in millions. Everyone knows his name. Shiva Trilogy, Immortals of Madura and all that, right? So, literary merits of Amish Tripathi's mythological fiction, that's what he calls these books as. It's very debatable. Its language is very flat, right? Very superfluous. But the strong influence, especially among the youth and teenagers, is beyond doubt. So what does he do? He attempts to marry liberal and progressive ideologies about gender, caste, etc. with the themes and stories in Hindu epics and Puranas. So he will portray Shiva as a character, who comes from the hills, who is a very free-spirited person. He is smoking ganja, he is marijuana, but he still comes and saves people. These kind of things he tries to put. So, what do we make out of it? I mean, is it civilizational consciousness? You can say yes and no. It is a pop level of expression. It's a surface level expression of Indic philosophy, culture and dharmic values. But he will always avoid controversial subjects and historical conflict. He only writes about very spiritual kind of themes. You can say it is one way of, at least some level of civilizational consciousness. Next level. So in closing, so this is my last slide. So what is the conclusion? So Indic civilizational consciousness is very much present. So let's not worry. That's a good thing to say in spite of all the gloom. So the madam spoke about sociology, right, and culture studies in humanities. But in literature, I feel that it is quite alike, because literature directly talks to people, unlike those academic areas which are mostly confined to universities and academic institutions. So it is very much present and vibrant in modern Indian literature, both in Indian languages as well as English writings, in a way. So the three things, again, this is what I want you to take back: sense of history, sense of ethos and values, sense of rasa. These are present in varying degrees with varying levels of importance and concern in modern Indian literary works. It is important to keep this consciousness alive, sharpening it and refining it continuously. So, one last remark I want to make is that even in modern literature, great literary works are by the Indian writers who are rooted and have intimate familiarity with Indian life, Indian languages, Indic idioms and philosophies, Indian classical literature and arts. Those are the people who have written great literature in India, and not those who have only peripheral and superfluous connection with India and are largely influenced by the West and popular global literary fads and fashions. So with that, I want to conclude my talk.
Thank you, sir. I would just like to appeal to all the